become verified on Facebook. But a lot of you sent me this story about the gorilla that grabbed a child who fell into a habitat at the Cincinnati Zoo. And it said that the officials killed it. I'm sure there's controversy over that because I'm sure a lot of people are saying, well, why don't you just tranquilize it? You know what I'm saying? But let's check this video out and I'll give you my thoughts. How'd the kid fall in? Wow, he's not doing nothing to him. Oh my God. My video paused. I don't know if that was their video or if it was YouTube. Okay, so let me see here. Okay, here's the story. It says gorilla shot dead after 4-year-old boy gets into enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo. Let me see here. It says a 4-year-old boy was hospitalized with serious injuries and a gorilla was shot dead after officials said the boy climbed through the railing and fell into the moat at the Cincinnati Zoo gorilla enclosure. A 17-year-old, 400-pound male lowland gorilla, Harambe, was shot and killed by the zoo's dangerous animal response team about 10 minutes after the boy made it into the enclosure. Zoo director Diane Maynard said the boy crawled through the railing and fell into the moat just before 4 p.m. Saturday. The Cincinnati Fire Department incident report says the gorilla was violently dragging and throwing the child when they were called. The child was between the gorilla's legs and the gorilla was shot, fire officials say. Because at first, like, with what they were showing, like, it didn't seem like he was doing anything. You know, apparently he picked him up and took him with him, but it didn't show that violent throwing and everything. It's a sad day all around, Maynard said. They made a tough choice, and they made the right choice because they saved the little boy's life. It could have been very bad. The gorillas in the enclosure, 3 gorillas were in the enclosure when the boy fell in the boat. 2 were called out of the enclosure immediately, but the 3rd, Harambe, stayed in the yard. One woman said that she saw the gorilla drag the boy from the one end of the habitat to another. Witnesses said they saw a woman crying and that the child was conscious during the rescue. The child was released Saturday night. His name has not been released. The gorilla was not tranquilized because when the animal is agitated, Maynard said the tranquilizer may not affect right away. That's why. This was the first time Cincinnati Zoo officials have killed an animal in this manner, Maynard said. The zoo houses 11 gorillas, according to its website. Gorilla World will be closed indefinitely, but the zoo will open as usual. It's a shame. It's a shame. To tell you the truth, I mean, this is just my own personal view. I don't go to circuses or zoos anymore. I haven't gone in years. So I think it's like a prison for them. They do. You know what I mean? Captured, made to do tricks in the fucking circus. Then they're captured, put into a small enclosure. You know what I mean? Imagine if you were captured and just put in a fucking room with a TV, a refrigerator, and you had to stay there like your whole fucking life. And there's a glass thing there, so a bunch of different animals could watch you live out your life, watching TV, doing your girlfriend in your bed, cooking your food. Can't leave. You know what I mean? I think it's rather fucked up. All for our entertainment and enjoyment. I think people can be taught about animals on safaris, you know, driving through their natural habitat, you know, stuff like that. Books, videos, you know. That's just my personal view. I've become very fond of animals and connect with them. I've become that way over the years, and it wasn't always like that. I was a guy, believe it or not, didn't give a fuck about animals when I was younger, in my teens. I didn't care if I heard that they died or whatever. It didn't bother me, but I don't know. Something about me changed over the years. Don't know. But I feel bad for the damn gorilla. It's a shame. And yeah, I guess if he's agitated, adrenaline's pumping. He could have hurt the child if he was tranquilized. So, but I wouldn't have been the one to make the call. I'd have been like, man, who's above me? Who's got to make that call? I don't know what to do, man. I felt bad because I'm wondering why. You know, it's one of those things where you're like, you know, I'm sure it's just like shit happens, you know. You know, you wonder, well, I wasn't a parent, you know, holding on to the child more. Why were the gates that fucking wide enough for the kid to crawl through? You know, I mean, it's just a lot of questions that, you know, that's probably why they're closing Gorilla World, so that they can fix the damn gates and everything so the kids can't get through. I mean, come on now. Anyway, post your comments down below. Let me know what you all thought. Man, crazy. Be sure to go over to my Facebook fan page, like that. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. If you did not, you can kiss my black derriere. 1 million subscribers. Woo! You may now subscribe.
Wow. Thanks for being here. You can imagine over the past 2 days we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of requests for interviews, so we couldn't respond to all of them individually, which is why we asked you here, but we'll certainly try to answer questions today. So obviously this is a very emotional time at the Cincinnati Zoo. It's unprecedented. We have never had to kill a dangerous animal in the middle of an emergency situation. The zoo's been here 143 years, so that's saying a lot. It is a big loss to the Cincinnati Zoo. Harambe was one of our most magnificent animals. He's a critically endangered species. We're one of the key players in gorilla captive breeding and conservation, and so it's a big loss. We had an all-employee meeting this morning, early in the morning. I've never seen so many people here at 7:45 in the morning for a holiday, but it showed that whether people were off today or not, they came because they really cared. The purpose of that meeting was different than this. It was for people to have a chance to share their feelings. There were tears, there were hugs. The people that knew Harambe the best, his keepers, shared a lot of stories about him. But everybody at the zoo feels the loss. There's no doubt about it. That does not just mean the dozen or so keepers in our primate department or the couple of hundred zoo employees, but you know, we have 1,000 volunteers at the zoo. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are members of the zoo, and of course the entire community is very involved with the Cincinnati Zoo. So it is a big loss. That said, we are very glad that the little boy is okay. That is one happy thing in a dangerous and bad story. Naturally, we did not take the shooting of Harambe lightly, but that child's life was in danger. And people who question that, or are Monday morning quarterbacks, or second guessers, don't understand that you can't take a risk with a silverback gorilla. They're very big, 3 times bigger than a man, 6 times stronger than that. This is a dangerous animal. Now, I know people see photos or videos, say, gosh, it doesn't seem dangerous. We're talking about an animal with one hand that I've seen take a coconut and crunch it. He was disoriented. He'd never had anything like that going on. And that also led to the decision, of course, not to dart the animal. Almost everybody knows if you were to, say, dart your household pet, if you were to receive a dart yourself, there'd be a pretty dramatic response. And if you were an animal like a gorilla and didn't understand it, you could have some sort of displaced aggression that would go right at what's the new thing in your area. So in the real world, you make difficult calls, but you have to make them, and the safety of that child was paramount. I'm proud of our team that handled it, and I'm proud of our team that's handled everything since. We have had lots of discussions with Harambe's keepers who've told amazing stories of him coming here 3 years ago. You may know he's baby Gladys's half-brother. And he was on a trajectory. He was starting to mature. He's 17. He was headed toward breeding in a few years. It takes a while, just like teenage boys. Teenage gorillas take a while to mature until they can have a family of their own. And, of course, that won't happen. But he certainly is missed, especially by those keepers that cared for him. His nickname was Handsome Harambe. He was a great-looking gorilla, but they said also a smart gorilla, that he was very easy to train and do, with, medical procedures or to, look in his mouth, check his teeth, things like that. Anyway, before I take questions, I'll also say, in tough times, you know who your friends are. We've heard from thousands of people around the world, colleagues all the way to Jane Goodall, zoo directors from all over the world, with both sympathy, with support for a difficult decision. And people that know gorillas well, people that research them in the wild, people that work with them in captivity, know exactly what decision we made and why. So I'm happy to take some questions.
Can you talk about the security barrier, the child guidance?
Hang on one at a time. John.
Yeah, well, you have talked about the dart and the tranquilizer situation. Was there any other alternative that was looked at by the dangerous response team to distract Harambe in any way?
Good question. Most of you might have been here the other day or have heard this, but the sequence of events was when we realized what had happened. Both our dangerous response team came, Cincinnati Fire Department was on grounds, and our keepers very alertly used the special call they have to bring the animals in. The females responded immediately and came in. The male, because he was stimulated, excited, and distracted by this little boy, did not go in. That would have been an ideal situation, but he did not go in, and he started to drag the boy around. An important thing to note is when you see snapshots, thank you, or you see clips, you might not see everything that happened. There are quotes directly from Cincinnati Fire Department in their official report. This child was being dragged around. His head was banging on concrete. This was not a gentle thing. The child was at risk. We're very fortunate that he's okay. So when it was determined that the child was being injured, not potentially injured, but was being injured, both down in the moat and then up on the ground, that we had to make a decision to shoot him, and we did.
How are the other gorillas doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. How are the other gorillas doing? We have 2 groups. We have the 2 females that live with him, and then we have another group of 7, which is a big family group with Jomo. The 2 that were living with him, obviously the next morning we're sort of looking around, much like periodically animals in zoos get shipped from one zoo to another. They don't know what happened, but they're doing fine and they're all resting.
They don't show any signs of loss. They didn't see any anything happen?
They did not see anything
No
happen.
signs
They were
of
inside.
loss, no sadness, anything like that?
I don't think so,
Are
no.
gorillas very, empathetic beings?
Gorillas are a lot like us. They live in family groups and they're very, very close.
Is the zoo negligent at all? How were there not more structural safeguards in place to keep the child from even being able to get in there in the first place?
The exhibit is safe. We're inspected both by the USDA and the AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, by the AZA every 5 years with accreditation, by the USDA twice a year. The barriers are safe. The barriers exceed any required protocols. The trouble with barriers is that whatever the barrier is, some people can get past it. Much the same way you might lock your car and sometimes people get in your car. And no, the zoo's not negligent.
Does more need to be done? Are you reviewing the structural barriers there and at the other exhibits?
As you can imagine, when anything happens, any emergency or crisis, naturally we are looking at that situation. The situation we have now is safe. It's the same as it has been. That said, we lost an incredibly magnificent animal that's an important part of our program. So it's important for us to make sure our animals are safe. So yes, we will look at it.
Was there any problem with that barrier at all? Was there any kind of an issue with the barrier?
No.
So nothing wrong with the fence, nothing that
No.
was out of order, same as it's been the last 30 plus years?
Correct.
You mentioned where's the failure here then? How did the child get in? Where was the failure? Where was the breakdown? Everything was up to code. Was it the parents' fault? Was it the guardrail's fault? Where do you place blame?
I'm not a big finger pointer. Politicians and pundits point fingers. We live in the real world and we make real decisions. People, kids, and others can climb over barriers. We work really hard to make sure that this zoo is safe and our guests are safe. We have over 1.6 million visitors a year. That said, people can climb over barriers, and that's what happened.
Isn't that the
Now
point
that
of a
you've had
barrier?
time to
Isn't that the
review-
point of a barrier, so that people can't get over or get through them?
As I said, the exhibit's safe and the barrier's safe. That said, any of us in this room could climb over barriers if we choose.
But we're
And if-
adults. This is a child.
I understand that.
So
So
we know
you-
better than to climb over. A child who doesn't understand the risk that he's in by climbing under, why would there not be more to make that impossible?
The barrier's adequate, and we all need to work to make sure that our families and our kids are safe, whether you're visiting the zoo or you're visiting a shopping mall.
So what is changing in the status quo? What is changing? This has happened. What's being
Sure, we're looking at it to determine what's the optimum situation. We're also in the midst of making big changes over the next year up there. We're doubling the size of the exhibit with a big indoor gorilla greenhouse. So as we look at all of that. Oh, no. That's important for our long-term breeding program and gorilla conservation.
Now that you've had time to review what happened, looking back, I know you were in crisis mode at the time. Looking back, would you make the same decision again to
Yes.
take the animal?
Looking back, we would make the same decision. I know that after it is over and the child is safe, it's easy like a Monday morning quarterback to look at it and say, wow, 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 don't we need to do this differently? The people that say that, A, don't understand primate biology and silverback gorillas and the danger the child was in, and B, we're not there at an important time to make important decisions. We stand by our decision, and we make the same call today.
You mentioned the day of the event that you had not yet spoken with the family. Have you been in touch with the family since then?
We have not been in touch with the family. They have requested privacy. I don't blame them, and everyone at the zoo is relieved that the little boy's okay.
Does the zoo plan on pressing charges against the parents of the school boy?
That would not be a good plan. The police were here. The police did not cite anyone. There's not a legal action. But I think they know we saved that little boy's life.
Tell us about the future of the breeding program. What's going to happen now and tell us how significant this is that he's gone.
Sure. Gorillas are one of the most endangered animals in the world. There are only 360 lowland gorillas in AZA-accredited zoos throughout North America, from Canada all the way to Mexico. Ours is a leading program. We've had 50 babies born at our zoo in the last 46 years. We will continue our breeding program. The breeding group we currently have that has 3 youngsters in it is still intact, and you know, folks see them when they come to the zoo. The 2 lone females that are not part of that group, over time, may end up with another male in their group as we grow that. But we'll see, and as I said, we're going to double the size of our exhibit space up there, which will allow us to have more and different configuration with our gorillas. But
Like you said, you only saw snapshots of that incident on film, and as we all know, that incident went on for about 10 minutes. Are you aware of any other video of this ongoing ordeal that might give more of a perspective of the seriousness of the situation as it continued to unfold?
I'm not a video expert, but we've talked extensively with people who were there, our security team, as well as members from Cincinnati Fire Department who were there. And they are all unanimous that that child wasn't just in danger, but was being dragged around by the ankle and being hurt.
Can you give us a step-by-step of that 10 minutes as it started to unfold? We see maybe about 2 minutes of what happened. It was a 10-minute incident. Do you have a step-by-step of what happened, say, after that video shut off?
Sure, a brief overview is a little before 4 o'clock on Saturday. This young child, 4-year-old I think, evidently went over the barrier and then through the bushes and into the moat. It's about 15 feet down into 1.5 feet of water. So he must be a tough little kid, because that's a lot to do right there. He was splashing around in the water. Naturally, the visitors, it was a crowded day, we had over 7,000 people in the zoo. They were reacting, and Harambe noticed that and looked. And on seeing him, he went down. He went into the water with him, swished him around in the water some, mostly by the ankle, and then decided he needed to take him up onto the land. He carried him up the ladder, put him up on top, and then again continued to do the same thing. Gorillas are not polar bears. He wasn't trying to eat the animal, obviously, or eat the child, but he was disoriented and wanted to get the child to sort of stay there and probably be like a gorilla would, which is different than the situation. Because, obviously the child was upset and people were screaming. During that time, our security team emptied the exhibit, and the dangerous animal response team officer came and dispatched Harambe. And the reason was that it was a life-threatening situation, and a silverback gorilla is a very dangerous animal. It would be a very dangerous animal to us, but particularly a dangerous animal to a little kid.
Any word yet on when the exhibit will reopen?
Hopefully by next weekend.
And you said the boy went over the barrier, but earlier
That's my understanding.
that he went under.
Well, my understanding from talking to folks that were there since that time is that he went over.
So how did he go over? Can you walk us through what you understand happened and how he was able to get in?
Do you know any 4-year-olds? They can climb over anything. So he climbed
So he
over
just
the
climbed
top.
over.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like anybody's taking responsibility for what happened. The zoo, the mother, we're all just chalking this up as an accident and everyone can go home. Does that sit okay?
The Cincinnati Zoo is taking responsibility.
You said there's nothing wrong with the barrier, though.
We're the ones that took the loss on this, and it's very important to us. You can trust me. A lot of people express concerns. A lot of people disagree, perhaps, with it, but it doesn't affect anybody as much as it affects the people here at the zoo.
How tall is this barrier?
The people,
But you're not
the people at
admitting
this zoo.
any wrongdoing here. You say the barrier's fine. The 4-year-old was just being a 4-year-old.
That's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we had a very, very difficult situation, and we made a very difficult call and handled it.
Do you think fault should lie with anyone, though?
As I said, I'm not here to point fingers about fault.
Is that barrier been the same for the last few years? Have there been any changes to it? It's kind of like a rail at the top, then open with some tension wires. Has that been like that for a few years?
It's the same barrier that's been there for 38 years, yes.
Okay. Are you checking all the other locations, like the bear locations, the the rhino location, the elephant? Because they have similar setups with loose tension wires, a few feet of bushes, and then a moat. Couldn't that same situation happen at those animal enclosures as well?
Naturally, at the Cincinnati Zoo, we take safety very seriously, and we are all the time keenly interested in continuous improvement. And so if you're familiar with the zoo, you'll know at different times, as things need to be changed, as they wear out, we add in more fences, guards, safety measurements. We do make sure that those areas are safe. But as I said, you can lock your car, you can lock your house, but if somebody really wants to get in, they can. But we take safety very seriously.
How does that compare with other zoos that have similar kind of displays? The barrier wall you guys have and the safety
Sure,
crossing?
very similar, very similar.
And to be clear, there are no vertical steel bars, do I understand that right? It was horizontal type bar? Are there any-
Every 8 feet or so, every 8 feet or so. It's a substantial rail. It's made out of stainless steel, and it's been there for 38 years.
Vertical bars every 8 feet,
Mm-hmm.
but not close together.
Correct. Correct.
So will you look at upgrading that then, so that a 4-year-old just being a 4-year-old can't climb over and end up in this kind of situation?
Absolutely. We're in the middle of looking at that right now, and the rationale behind that is we just lost one of our most important animals. So we have to make sure our animals are safe.
And with children as well. I mean, this is where parents bring their children to the zoo, and they should feel safe knowing that their kid, just being a kid, isn't going to be able to end up in this situation. I would imagine that's a priority as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the industry standard for barriers? Are you just like every other zoo that has this? Can this happen anywhere else?
Well, I mean, tragedies, mistakes, accidents can happen all the time, and there's no guaranteeing against those. But all over the zoo, we take safety very seriously, and we review our barriers very seriously, both the barriers to keep people out and the barriers to keep animals in, making sure that the fences are high enough to keep them in and the barriers are high enough to keep people out.
You mentioned that the barriers are reviewed by someone or reviewed by, there's someone keeping the zoo accountable for if their barriers are meeting standards?
Accredited zoos in North America are accredited through a group called the AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Every 5 years we go through an accreditation process that's increasingly arduous year by year as zoos become more professional. In addition to that, zoos are regulated by the USDA. And twice a year we have veterinary inspections that look at everything from exhibit areas to behind-the-scenes areas to our care and feeding and medical care of our collection.
So you said that the exhibit could be open again by next weekend, and that you're reviewing possible changes to keep people safe. Will those safeguards or any kind of new safeguards be in place when the exhibit reopens?
The exhibit will be completely safe when it opens. I don't know the answer what changes might or might not be, but we are reviewing that. And naturally, taking this very, very seriously. This is a very big loss to the zoo. Not just an emotional loss, but a loss to a key conservation and breeding program that we run. So making sure the animals stay safe, making sure the visitors stay safe is our priority.
But you're not sure if there will be any changes in place when the exhibit reopens?
As I said, we're looking at how to do that best, and I don't know the answer.
Was there a specific protocol for the DART team? Like, in other words, do they practice this specific scenario? And if they do, what was the last time that they actually practiced?
Sure. That's a good question. I'm very proud of our DART team, our Dangerous Animal Response Team, and our security team. They do drills regularly. They train regularly. They go to the shooting range regularly. They are certified by the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. And clearly they are steady at the moment of truth. We've never had a situation like this before at the zoo, but they meet and both do physical drills as well as meet to do sort of tabletop discussion drills. And they had done that as recently as last week, which was them doing that in response to a similar situation that happened in a zoo in Chile with, I think, predators that were in people and predators in an exhibit.
Has there ever been another incident like this at that exhibit or in the zoo?
Never where we've had to kill an animal. We have had accidents at the zoo. We had a zookeeper lose her arm to a polar bear, but she was not in the exhibit. We've had other people hurt by animals, but never in a situation where their life was at risk like this.
How many times was Harambe shot?
Once.
And
What's being done with his body right now?
There's a future. We have, of course, a renowned assisted reproduction program called CREW, the Linder Center for Conservation and Research of Endangered Wildlife. Those are reproductive biologists. They've collected viable sperm from him, which are important to bank on a real endangered species for genetic reasons and future populations in zoos. In addition, we've been contacted by a number of scientists working on genetics issues and other issues with lowland gorillas. And so most of that is in the function of storing tissue for potential future both research as well as possible breeding purposes.
Is this the end of his gene pool then? This is not the end of his gene pool. His sperm was saved? Some of it?
His sperm was saved. It's not the end of his gene pool. In addition, he and his lineage are part of an ongoing breeding program. As I mentioned, Gladys, the famous now 3 or 4-year-old gorilla that's in our exhibit, also came from the zoo in Brownsville, Texas, and she's his half-sister.
And you praised the way the response was handled, but the boy was in there for 10 minutes. Could they have reacted quicker?
I think we reacted remarkably quickly, and we were remarkably fortunate that the boy wasn't hurt.
How tall was the barrier and how many feet of bushes were there before the drop-off?
The barrier is a little over 3 feet high, and the distance between the barrier and the if you will, the drop zone there is about 4 feet deep.
And it's a 15-foot drop,
Mm-hmm.
and you're in the water.
Correct.
As you try to balance the safety of the patrons versus their ability to access and see the animals, is there a takeaway? Is there a message for parents and people who take kids to the zoo moving forward?
Sure. Very fortunately, this zoo is a long-standing, beloved institution in Cincinnati, and so I think people recognize that we care about our animals. I've spent the last couple of days here at the zoo walking on the grounds, and many, many people, strangers, come up and talk about it. They know this is hard, and they're sorry about Harambe, but they care about him. In terms of a message that, yeah, everybody should keep a hold of their kids, keep an eye on them, here or anywhere, the shopping mall, right, schoolyard. But the zoo is a safe place. This is the one time this sort of thing has happened in 143 years.
What do you think about the backlash that you and the mother have received over the last few days?
I'm old enough, I don't pay much attention to social media. And most of from the legitimate media, it's all been pretty positive, and from our colleagues, particularly so.
Were there surveillance cameras in the enclosure or anywhere in that complex area?
Do you mean that, like, caught the whole?
Does the zoo have surveillance cameras? Most zoos or facilities do have them to watch the animals overnight or in case there's an issue. Do you have any surveillance cameras in the gorilla world area?
I don't believe we do, because I haven't seen the kind of video you're talking about. We have a lot of sort of closed-circuit video in areas where we aren't, such as in the back of buildings, so we can observe animals when we're not here.
Do you have any statistics on how many children come to the zoo every year?
Well, if it's half our visitors, it'd be 800,000, but I guess it's maybe more than half our visitors. I know some families come with one parent and 3 kids, so million kids a year probably.
You're the expert.
That'd be
Lots
my
of
guess.
non-experts are saying, oh, that looked like the gorilla was protecting. It looked like the gorilla was protecting. What was the gorilla doing? Was he treating this boy like a baby gorilla?
The gorilla was clearly agitated. The gorilla was clearly disoriented. And so the idea of waiting and shooting it with a hypodermic was not a good idea. That would have definitely created alarm in the male gorilla. And as I'm sure you know, when you dart an animal, or even if you yourself go to the hospital, anesthetic doesn't work in 1 second. It works over a period of a few minutes to 10 minutes. So the risk was due to the power of that animal.
But was he trying to protect the child? In your eyes, as someone who does study gorillas?
In my eyes, he was acting erratically. He was disoriented, and it's due to his strength. That's where the danger was.
What
Is there a monetary value the zoo's gonna have to take a get a hit on?
That's a good question. Today we live in a world where endangered species aren't bought and sold. So when we breed cheetahs at our breeding farm and then we send them off to other zoos, it's just part of a breeding agreement. And certainly the same thing's true with gorillas. So they're not an animal that you can say, okay, well, they're $1 million to get one. It's a process of, like a big computerized dating game, dealing with other zoos, trading back and forth.
Is there any legislation that you guys are potentially scared to face with the death of the animal? Are there statutes in place in the Endangered Species Act that protect zoos in situations like this from any national or federal litigation?
No, I think we're good in that regard. As you run a zoo with wild animals, you have to have a number of priorities, and certainly one of them is safety of our visitors, our employees, as well as safety of our animals. So,
are you in favor of increasing signage to greater warn children and parents about getting close to those barricades, those barriers that you mentioned? Are you in favor of anything like that adding to? I know you said you're looking at the barriers. You're not sure exactly what the changes are going to be made.
well, we have a lot of signs at the zoo about don't feed the animals or don't cross the barriers or wild animals are dangerous. We can certainly look at that and put a couple more up. The theme would be respect the animals. That's what we're trying to do, is to not have people, whether it's by throwing food in there or certainly by climbing in there, in one way or another harming our animals or causing the death of our animals.
Just to clarify, is Harambe's body still here
Yes.
physically? Are you having any sort of memorial service for the staff here? Or or anything like that in sort of remembrance of him?
I don't think we have a formal memorial service planned. A step of that today was the full zoo staff coming together just to share our thoughts and memories of him and to talk about it and to cry a little bit.
You said that your main concern was his strength, and in the beginning you spoke a little bit about him being able to crush a coconut with his hand. Could you give us any other examples of just the sheer power this gorilla had?
Well, he was over 420 pounds, so that's bigger than anybody on the Cincinnati Bengals, as an example. His arms, yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with gorillas. Most primates, but not all, most primates have a big upper body and a small lower body, unlike humans. So his arms are as big as our legs. They're very big, very strong appendages. The difference is they have a huge hand that's extremely strong, and that's where his strength comes from, his chest, his arms, and that was the risk.
What is the reaction from all of the other zoos? You mentioned, I did it here right, more than 1,000 zoo officials have talked. What is their reaction?
They are obviously sympathetic and empathetic. They know how much people in zoos love their animals. They know that it's a challenge with an iconic species like a silverback lowland gorilla, because gorillas are a beloved species. It's just true. We all know his name, right? We don't know every zebra's name, but we know our gorillas' names. And so they know that we're going through a lot. They offer their support.
What do you think it says that they are all backing you up?
They're professionals who understand the animal business. They understand the power of gorillas, and they understand tough decisions have to be made.
Have you been in contact with the Gladys Porter Zoo since the incident?
I have not personally, but our primate curator, who has a relationship with their primate folks, have.
Is there any concern at all that this will affect visits in the future from people?
No, I think the opposite. I think people will show how much they care about animals. People that work at zoos love animals, and people innately love animals. And this is a town that loves its zoo and it loves its gorillas. So I think folks will be here to see them.
When will the exhibit open again?
This weekend is the hope.
Let's go 2 more questions.
You might have seen this. I don't know if it's been on the press or not, but a charming thing. Ever since yesterday morning, people have some been bringing flowers and notes, mostly putting them around. We have a gorilla statue over at the entrance to our gorilla center, and with lots of kind notes, and that's been a sweet thing about him.
So to be specific, it'll open Saturday?
That's our goal. Yeah.
Any legal ramifications in the future for either the zoo or these people, do you know?
I don't know, but I hope not.
What do you think
Who
about a
oversees
law?
this
What do you think
investigation? You guys
about?
got going on. It's like an investigation, how you're looking into this. Is that just the zoo itself? Does the USDA, or is there someone who will check off on that when you're done with it?
Sure. As I mentioned, zoos are regulated by the USDA, so they'll take a look at this situation. They are charged with, reinforcing the Animal Welfare Act and the Endangered Species Act, so to make sure that we're checking off all the boxes as we do it. And then naturally, in our case, we're looking at this area and at other areas around the zoo to make sure that the barriers are just right.
What do you think about Harambe's law? I don't know if you've seen it, but it would keep parents or someone who's not paying attention accountable if an animal that's critically endangered has to be shot. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I am not familiar with it. I've heard that there were some petitions or something. That all sounds very complicated, and I don't know the answer to it.
You mentioned Jane Goodall. Could you tell us what came out of that exchange? There was some...
She sent her sympathy.
Last question.
Can you expand on what you were just talking about? You said that you were going to look at safety in other areas of the zoo. Is there a safety audit plan, or is there something specific
Sure.
planned that you can have in place that's going to be coming up here?
Well, as I said, and I think folks maybe even the other day heard me say, obviously if you have a park that's open to over 1.6 million people a year, you have over 10,000 kids spend the night at the zoo in the dark, you take safety very seriously. So we review safety regularly. We have a security and safety team. We also have a system through both our facilities program as well as through our keepers who are out on the grounds to review areas regularly, look at them and see what needs to be improved or repaired. And that's an ongoing process. And we'll make sure it's tight.
We need your name.
My name is Thane Maynard. I'm director of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden.
Could you spell it for us?
ThaneMaynard.
Thanks, guys.